You see, the first thing we have to realize is that avoidant individuals are not cold, heartless, or broken. They're wired differently. Their entire nervous system has been conditioned by one fundamental belief: closeness equals danger. Somewhere along the line, they came to understand that emotional intimacy has a cost: judgment, rejection, or loss of control. So when you begin to get closer, when you begin to express more emotion, their system doesn't say, "Oh, this is fantastic." It says, "Oh, I'm going to lose myself." And they pull away, not because they don't care, but because safety lies in distance. Now, this is where everybody makes the error. They read that pullback as rejection. They panic, they chase, they overcommunicate, they begin proving themselves to you. And the moment you do that, the avoidant mind validates its worst fear. See, connection to smothered, so they retreat even further. It becomes this emotional dance of push and pull, and the more you try to reach them, the quicker they disappear. But what if you were able to look at that dance for what it is? What if you could step out of it altogether, not as a strategy, not as manipulation, but as mastery? When you get the avoidance world, you cease reacting to it, you cease taking it personally, you begin to understand that their silence is not about you, it's about keeping them safe. And that change in perspective is everything, because the second you quit chasing, you begin leading, you arrive with emotional intelligence, you demonstrate to them, without saying a word, that you are able to do space, you are able to maintain your own energy without theirs to fill it up. That's attractive to an avoidant. Why? Because it diffuses their fear. It sends their subconscious, "You're safe here. You don't have to run. Consider this. If their greatest fear is losing control, what's the most seductive energy to them? Someone who doesn't need to control them in return. Someone who walks slowly, steadily, without anxiety." That's why understanding is your first quiet step. When you look at their avoidance as anything other than rejection, but regulation, you transition from emotional reactivity to emotional leadership. And leadership is sexy, it's not boisterous, it doesn't pursue, it doesn't beg for attention, it owns its space. It understands that closeness cannot be enforced, it must be elected. And the only way an avoidant will elect closeness is when they can breathe within it. So you build that space by owning yourself first. That's where empathy kicks in, not the squishy, people-pleasing variety, but the robust variety, the one that's like, "I understand where you're at, and I respect your speed." When you're working with that energy, you transition from being a pursuer to being a mirror. They start to see in you what they've been afraid of in themselves: stability, security, emotional acuity, and that reflection starts to draw them in quietly. You've got to recall, relationships aren't constructed in terms of matching behavior, they're constructed in terms of matching energy. When you're vibrating on the level of security, you're giving permission to others to meet you there. That's the paradox of attraction. When you cease attempting to repair someone, they start to match your calm. When you cease attempting to demonstrate your worth, they start to sense it. The initial move isn't to pursue, to discuss, or to persuade. The initial move is comprehension. When you comprehend the avoidant, you leave the narrative behind and step into strategy. You quit fueling the cycle of nervousness and remoteness, and instead, you become the calm that creates a sense of safety so they can engage once more. That is how you create silence in a signal. That is how you make space attractive. And that's how you start to attract an avoidant closer, not by requiring them to change, but by becoming the energy that enables them to. You see, all things in life boil down to one thing state. Your emotional state controls the way you think, the way you talk, the way you behave, and the way others interact with you. When you're in a state of fear, anxiety, or scarcity, you emanate it. You can't conceal it. Individuals can sense it. And avoidance, oh boy, they really feel it. They are highly sensitive to pressure in the emotional arena. If your energy conveys, "I need you to respond," or "I need you to acknowledge me," they pick up on it before you utter a word. And what do? They pull back, not because they are uncaring, but because your energy is heavy. It invades their sense of emotional control. That's why emotional centering isn't a good idea. It's everything. It's the difference between pushing connection away and pulling it towards you. You can't encourage someone to want your attention if your energy is crying out for it. You encourage them to want it when your energy indicates, "I'm whole." Because here's the thing, nothing draws people in like peace, nothing. So what is emotional centering? Exactly, it is learning to master your inner life before attempting to control the outer one. It is catching yourself as that urge to text, to check, to repair begins to build, and rather than reacting, you breathe. You give your attention to what is inside you, not to what is lacking. When you control your feelings, you move from desperation to direction, and other people pick up on it immediately. Consider this: when you're grounded, you don't pursue answers, you become the answer. You don't look for energy, you create it. That is what personal power is all about. It's not power over others, it's power over yourself. And when you exhibit that type of power, avoidants who are accustomed to emotional chaos begin to feel something new around you, safety. They start to wonder, why does it feel so calm when I'm with this person? And that curiosity becomes the seed of connection. I want you to visualize this: two individuals in a space. One is nervous, anxious, attempting to prove themselves. The other is serene, centered, utterly at peace with themselves. Who do you think holds the power in this space? Who do you think everyone's focus is drawn toward? Always the grounded one. Because energy doesn't deceive. Your presence is louder than your words ever possibly could be. And here's the trick: centering isn't about stifling feeling. It's not faking detachment or playing games of hard to get. It's about experiencing fully without getting lost. It's about recognizing your feelings. I feel hurt, I feel invisible, but not using them to control the wheel. Because the minute you give over control to feeling, you lose power. When you remain rooted in awareness, you reclaim it. Tony Robbins is always saying, quality of your life is the quality of your emotional state. If you can shift your state, you can shift your relationship. That's why I advise people make rituals for peace. Meditate, right? Move your body, say your gratitude. Do whatever you must do to lift your vibration every day. Because your emotional baseline is your energetic broadcast, and you can't draw calm connection if your signal is chaos. When you get to the place of being emotionally centered, something magical occurs. You no longer react to distance. You no longer attempt to control the outcome. You begin understanding that your power isn't in what they do, it's in responding. That's when avoidants begin to notice. They can sense your shift. They can't rationalize it, but emotionally, it's like a gravitational pull. You've ceased chasing, and yet inexplicably, they feel attracted to your calm. So don't forget, it's not the loudest energy that prevails. It's the most grounded one. When your presence communicates, I'm good, I'm whole, and I trust the timing of this connection, you make a quiet invitation for them to get closer. That's emotional centering happening. It's quiet strength. It's impossible stillness. And it's the basis for all other quiet moves that come after it. Silence is perhaps the most misused force in human relationships. Most people equate silence with absence. They believe it equals rejection, indifference, or punishment. But the truth is, silence, when employed with awareness, is one of the most powerful communication tools you have available, particularly when you're working with someone avoidant. Because here's the truth: avoidants need you to fill in the blanks. They need you to pursue, to clarify, to substantiate, fill in every gap with reassurance. When you don't, when you can be still with relaxed energy rather than panic, you utterly shift the dynamic. Look, silence carves out space, and it is in the space that curiosity resides. If you dash to fill up every second, you deprive the connection of oxygen. You make no space for the other person to reach back. If you can sustain silence, not as a tool, not as withdrawal, but as confidence, you extend an invitation for the other person to lean toward you. That's the paradox. The less you take, the more they begin to want. Non-reaction is the same principle in action. Most humans are emotionally conditioned to respond. They receive a brief text in return, and they spiral. They pick up on distance, and they pursue it. They feel ignored, and they overcompensate. Each response you have to their avoidance reinforces that they hold power over your emotional life, and that's precisely what keeps them away. When you use non-reaction, you reclaim that power. You're sending them a quiet message that reads, I'm grounded, I'm not shaken, you can take space, and I'll still be fine. Consider this: when you pull back and you don't freak out, what does that consciously tell them? It tells them, this person is safe. This person doesn't need to control me in order to feel secure. And for an avoidant, that is revolutionary. They've constructed their entire emotional infrastructure on the premise that closeness means loss of control. When you demonstrate by silence and equanimity that intimacy doesn't need to be suffocation, you start rewiring how they feel about intimacy in your presence. But let's be clear, this type of silence is not cold or unfeeling. It's not punishment. I'll ignore you until you miss me. That's manipulation, and manipulation creates resistance. What we're discussing is deliberate stillness. It's energy that speaks and says, I'm here, I'm open, but I'm not chasing, I'm not collapsing, I'm not losing myself in your absence. That's the kind of silence that speaks louder than any argument ever has. You've likely experienced this yourself. Those times when someone doesn't respond to your tantrum, just maintains steady eye contact and lets you exhaust your emotions until you're spent. Presence is unsettling. It calls forth your own energy. That's what your silence accomplishes with an avoidant. When they pull back, betting that they'll be chased, and you just breathe, you reflect back their avoidance, you hold the space instead of filling it, and that space becomes magnetic because it's rare. The truth is, silence is not passive, it's active discipline. Practice of choosing peace over panic, self-control over reaction. And that choice doesn't go unnoticed. The avoidant begins to feel your absence. Not because you're gone, because you're different. Your silence becomes a mirror that makes them aware of their own distance. It attracts them not by guilt or fear, but by fascination. Why aren't they responding? Why is this so peaceful? Why do I feel drawn to that peace? That's when attraction begins to pivot. Here, your silence is your power. Your non-response is your language of empowerment. You're no longer chasing connection. You're building an energy field that attracts it in. You're showing wordlessly that love doesn't pursue, it selects. That intimacy isn't about ongoing talk, about the nature of being there. And when your silence is imbued with peace rather than consequence, it's the most compelling noise in the room. Intimacy isn't about pursuit, it's about being there. That's one of those facts that sounds trivial but shifts everything once you actually live it. What the majority believe is that connection is more of an effort, the right words, the right texts, being more interested, demonstrating more love. But what if connection isn't even about effort? What if it's about energy, about the quiet confidence that declares, I don't have to pursue you in order to be with you. That's the shift, pursuit to presence. You see, pursuit is based on fear. It's born out of a fear that if I don't keep grasping, I'll lose you. Saying, I'm not enough unless you approve of me. Presence, by contrast, comes from a space of plenty. It says, I bring something worthy to this relationship, my energy, my peace, my purpose, and I don't have to pursue what's already in harmony with me. When you move from that place, your relationships begin to change. You cease to perform for love and begin to incarnate it. Avoidance will sense the difference in an instant. When your energy is chasing, it activates their self-protection system. Every message you post, every text you send has this tacit hum of, please choose me. And the second they sense that, they begin to recede. But when you're coming from presence, peaceful, full, grounded, they experience freedom in your presence. You become a person they can actually unwind with. They begin to identify you with calm rather than stress. That's when they begin to yearn for your attention, not because you're pursuing, but because your quiet feels like home. Presence implies that your life is already full. You have purpose, growth, meaning. You don't revolve around another person's availability. You walk at your own pace. That's magnetic. Others are attracted to individuals who have their own momentum. You don't have to declare it or brag about it. You just do it. If an avoidant notices that your world continues spinning, your energy remains high, your attention remains ahead, they begin questioning, wait, what's going on over there? That intrigue is the start of attraction. And here's the catch, presence doesn't equal indifference. It doesn't equal faking not caring. It equals that you care from a place of centering. You're still kind, still engaged, still open but not bound to the other person's reaction. Your peace isn't negotiable. You can love deeply and remain steady. You can show warmth and remain boundary. That's emotional leadership, and emotional leadership is magnetic. When you're in presence, you listen with a different mind. You listen to understand, not to respond. You speak from truth, not triggers. You cease chasing outcomes and begin to observe moments. Because the truth is, connection doesn't reside in the future. It resides here in this moment, in your awareness, in your energy. Avoidance, like all of us, pick up on that. They might not have words for it. They sense when someone is present with them as opposed to attempting to get something from them. That distinction is everything. There's this saying, energy introduces you before you even speak. That's presence. It's the silent self-assurance that communicates, I'm already whole. And when you enter a room such as this, you shift the energy in the room. You don't have to chase, persuade, or prove. You simply exist. People pick up on it and they gravitate toward it naturally. Because presence is safe, presence is powerful, presence is real. So if you're going to paint an avoidant closer, then forget pursuit. Forget closing the space. Instead, focus on being entirely here. Each time you find yourself leaning out from fear, stall, breathe, ask yourself, what energy am I in now, pursuit or presence, and switch. Ground into your body, into thankfulness, into tranquility. Because when you are in presence, You're no longer holding out for connection. You are the connection. And here's the paradox. When you let go of pursuing, you begin to attract. When you let go of needing to prove, you begin to inspire. When you let go of seeking love, you begin to become it. That's when the avoidant notices your energy shift. That's when fear is replaced by curiosity. And that's when connection, true earthy connection, begins at last. Detachment. That word makes a lot of people uneasy. They think it means not caring, quitting, or playing games. But actual emotional detachment is not any of those things. It's not indifference. It's inner confidence. It's not coldness. It's freedom within. Detachment just means this: your peace is no longer predicated on what someone else does. And when you get to that point, you become magnetic, because now your energy conveys the one thing every avoidant unconsciously wants to hear. You're free, because avoidants are ultra sensitive to control. The instant they sense that your happiness, your peace, your sense of self hinges on them, they back off. It's not because as they're attempting to hurt you, it's because to them, that degree of emotional dependence is akin to drowning. But when you unhook, you take the pressure off, you send a silent message: you can come and go and I'll remain grounded. That doesn't push them away. It attracts them, because now they can come near without worrying about getting lost in your feelings. Now, here's the paradox. Detachment does not imply that you stop loving. It implies that you stop clinging, gauging your worth based on their response. Stop interpreting their silence as a reflection of your value. You begin to get it that your feelings of wholeness are not something to be earned, but are an inside job. And the moment you do, your energy changes overnight. You transition from anxious to anchored, chasing to choosing, from seeking love to being love. When you're attached, you respond to everything. You text because you're worried they've lost interest. You scroll through their social media because you're looking for reassurance. You emulate their withdrawal because you need to get control back. But each of those behaviors is supporting the same thinking: my emotional stability depends on them. And that energy is precisely what keeps avoidance away. When you detach, your actions are from a different place. You text because you really want to communicate, not because you're scared of losing them. You create space not as punishment, but as respect. You no longer work out of fear, you work out of fullness, and fullness is different. It's peaceful, it's confident, it's freedom. Consider this: when a person is deeply grounded in their own life, when they have passion, purpose, and self-respect, you can feel it. They don't require your approval to feel important. They aren't holding out for your validation to be noticed. And because of that, you trust them. You want to hang around them. Why? Because their energy isn't insisting, it's inviting. That's the energy of detachment. It's so powerful because it's free. Tony Robbins has said many times, the person who needs nothing can have everything. That's what detachment does. It takes need out of the picture and puts choice in. You no longer need their connection, and now you choose it. You no longer react to their distance, and now you respect it. You no longer wait for them to be present, and now you show up for yourself. And that changes everything. Avoidants aren't attracted to chaos. They're attracted to stillness. They're attracted to individuals who exude self-trust, who don't break when things get quiet, who can love without losing themselves. Detachment provides you with that authority. It's not withdrawing love. It's holding it but not clutching. It's acknowledging, I love you very much, but I don't require you to be someone for me to be all right. That is emotional mastery. When you step back, you transition from anxious to authoritative. You're no longer the one responding to every change. You're the one establishing it. You become the peace in the midst of the storm, and that peace becomes magnetic. Because in a world with so much noise, quiet is uncommon, and what's uncommon always gets noticed. So quit trying to grip harder. Quit attempting to persuade, manipulate, or adjust. Let go, not to get lost, but to lead. Because when you let go of attachment, you let go of pressure. And when pressure dissolves, space is created. And in that space, the avoidant finally has room to breathe, to feel, and eventually to reach back to you. Not because they're pursued, but because your freedom feels like home. Mystery. It's one of the strongest forces of attraction. And yet, most people have no idea what it is. They believe mystery is playing hard to get, being distant, or being unconcerned. That's not mystery. That's game playing. True mystery is not about concealment. It's about growth. It's about being so absorbed in your own unfolding, your own becoming, that other people don't know what you're going to do next, because even you're finding out as you move along. And that vibe, it's charged, it's living, it's impossible to resist, particularly to an avoidant. Avoidants are attracted to freedom, not control. They yearn for autonomy. They dread being stuck in emotional patterns they can't get out of. So when you become predictable, when your energy always centers around them, when they know just how you'll respond, when every step you take is about maintaining the connection, you lose your edge. You're part of the emotional noise they're trying to avoid. But when you're unpredictable in a rooted, real way, something shifts. You're no longer part of their familiarity, and you begin to become part of their wonder. And wonder is the path to connection. Consider this. The human brain is designed to pursue what it cannot completely understand. When you introduce a little mystique, a new path, a new initiative, a new passion, you disrupt the cycle of predictability. You remind them that you're not standing still, that you're not waiting in the same emotional place they left you. You've changed, you're changing. And change is magnetic. Because now, instead of predicting exactly how you'll react, they're wondering, what's different about them? What changed? See, when an avoidant puts distance between you and them, unconsciously assume time stands still. They think you'll remain emotionally frozen, wait, wonder, worry. When you don't, when you move, when you begin living from expansion rather than reaction, breaks the script. Suddenly, they're not the sole entity moving, you are too. And that breaking draws them in because now they sense something they weren't anticipating: your autonomy. Mystery isn't about being distant. It's about being dynamic. It's about showing through your actions that your world is bigger than one relationship. You're learning new things, meeting new people, taking care of yourself, exploring your passions. You're in motion, and motion is magnetic because avoidants are drawn to strength that doesn't demand, to confidence that doesn't chase, to joy that doesn't depend on them. Consider the most interesting individuals you have encountered in your lifetime. They weren't the ones who were always pursuing attention. They were the ones completely engaged in their calling, in their existence. Their energy communicated, you can walk with me, but I'm still moving ahead. That is the energy of mystery. It cautions others to step in closer, not because you require them, but because you're so alive that they want to be surrounded by it. Here's the thing, predictability is comfortable for a bit, but it's also boring. When you introduce unpredictability with growth, you rekindle emotional tension. You remind them that connection is not control, it's discovery, and discovery is what brings them back, not because you're holding out, but because you're growing. How do you make that sort of mystery happen? You remain interested in your evolution. You pay attention to experiences that enlarge your world. You refrain from recounting every aspect of your emotional process. You allow your silence to speak for itself. You allow your transformation to speak more than you do. You let them see the difference rather than tell them, because when individuals see your growth without you announcing it, it resonates deeper. It feels authentic. When you live from that energy, something profound happens. The avoidance stops associating you with pressure and starts associating you with possibility. You become the unknown in the best way. The kind of unknown that excites them, not scares them. They begin to feel drawn toward you, not out of obligation, but out of intrigue. They begin to question what it would be like to belong to your world once more, not because they are pursued, but because they are welcomed by your transformation. So remember, mystery is not about making space. It's about making depth. It's about allowing people to view your transformation without having to define it. It's the subtle strength of being unanticipatable in your growth, irreplaceable in your purpose, and immovable in your peace. And when you're living off that energy, you cease to be the one hoping that they'll return, because now they're the one hoping that they didn't let you get away. Emotional self-sufficiency, that's the building block of all things, because unless you become your own source, you'll always be waiting for someone else to fill you up. And when you're waiting, you're running after. You're negotiating your peace, surrendering your power to the other person without even knowing it. The avoidance senses that immediately. They know when your feelings hinge on their participation. It puts pressure on you, and pressure to an avoidant doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like being trapped. But when you move from requiring energy to generating it, you level the whole emotional playing field. Suddenly, you're no longer the pursuer of connection, you are the connection. Let's get one thing clear: emotional self-sufficiency does not equal not caring or not requiring anyone. It equals no longer farming out your sense of value. You've become proficient at nourishing yourself emotionally via purpose, gratitude, movement, expansion, self-knowing. You can replenish your own reservoir, and that autonomy, that inwardly derived peace, generates a safety around you that's highly appealing to someone who trades entanglement on an emotional level. Avoidants are not afraid of love, they are afraid of responsibility. They do not want to be responsible for handling your highs and lows. When they feel as though your joy is dependent on them, their system says, I'll lose myself in this. But when your energy says, I've got me, their nervous system calms. They no longer feel like your emotional caretaker and begin to see you as equal. And that realignment shifts everything. Consider the contrast between emotional dependency and emotional strength. Dependency speaks and says, I need you to be here so I will be all right. Strength says, I am all right, and I'd really like to bring that energy with me. Which one would you guess brings people in? Always the second one, because everyone, avoidant or otherwise, wants to be around individuals who are aglow from the inside out, who radiate warmth without expecting it in return. You've seen this trend in your own life too. When you're grounded, centered, doing what makes you happy, people begin to show up, doors open. You become attractive to positive energy. Why? Because you're not clinging, you're emitting. That's emotional self-sufficiency at work. You're full because you've learned to nourish your own soul. Tony Robbins teaches that where focus goes, energy flows. When your focus is on what is missing, you amplify scarcity. Yet when your focus is on what you can bring forth, you amplify abundance. It works the same in relationships. When your energy affirms, I'm already full, others feel safe getting close to you. There is no pressure, no desperation, no emotional debt to be paid. And it is that safety that causes even the most avoidant personality to begin to lean in. The reality is, people don't fall in love with need. They fall in love with energy. They fall in love with how you make them feel. And when your energy is calm, joyful, and whole, you are a safe haven in a chaotic world. That's what avoidants want, even if they can't put it into words. They want connection without cost to their freedom. They want someone whose joy isn't delicate, whose self-esteem won't shatter when they want to be alone. So how do you develop that sort of independence? You begin small. You catch yourself every time you go for outside reassurance and instead say, what can I give myself right now? Perhaps it's a walk, a workout, a moment of thankfulness, or even just breath. You begin to treat your own feelings the way you would want someone else to, patiently, gently, consistently, and it becomes your new normal over time. You no longer wait for permission, and you begin to live from inspiration. When you are emotionally independent, you transition from pursuing to magnetizing. You no longer require people to fill you up, and you begin to invite people to enrich you. You walk through life like a person who's already full, and that fullness is attractive. Avoidants begin to sense something different about you. Peace without pressure, closeness without control, love without fear. And that's the magic. When you no longer require them to make you feel sufficient, they can finally afford to choose you. Not because you're tugging, not because you're demonstrating, but because your energy has transformed into the thing that they desire, calm, free, and whole, turning a pull-through value. This is where your energy begins to become gravity, because attraction isn't about pursuing, persuading, or demonstrating. It's not about trying to get someone to want you. It's about becoming a person whose presence creates so much value that people organically want to be around you. You don't attract avoidance, or anyone for that matter, by insisting on their focus. You attract them by being someone whose energy, expansion, and peace feel like something to come back to. Avoidants aren't allergic to connection, just to pressure. They back away when they feel that you're relying on them for your fulfillment, but they come closer when they feel that your world is alive and full on its own. The more value you create in your own life, the more your presence becomes magnetic. And that's not theory, that's human psychology. People are attracted to strength, to joy, to purpose. They're drawn to those who make life feel lighter, not heavier. Think about it. Have you ever seen someone who just seemed to radiate, someone who wasn't trying to impress anyone, but who, because of their confidence, laughter, and passion, was impossible to ignore? That's what happens when you begin creating pull-through value. You are a living reflection of what peace and growth feel like. You don't need to convince anyone to notice. Shiki feels it. So, how do you do it? You invest in what makes you come alive. You put money into your growth, your passions, your health, your happiness. You create a life that honors your values and your vision. When your energy expands, it communicates more powerfully than any text or discussion ever can. An avoidant may not say it verbally, but they will feel it when you begin radiating differently. They'll sense that change in your vibration, the one that is, I'm not waiting for love to complete me, I've created happiness, and love is invited to join it. Tony Robbins tells us the secret to living is giving, And it works here as well. When you're serving from abundance rather than lack, you bring value wherever you go. You give your energy freely because it's abundant, not because you're trying to earn something. You bring laughter, presence, compassion, purpose, and people feel elevated by you. That's the pull. It's not about effort, it's about energy. When your presence uplifts others, they'll always find their way back to it. Avoidants are not attracted to need, they're attracted to energy. They're attracted to someone who is alive because that kind of energy is scarce. When your attention switches from, how do I get their attention, to, how do I multiply my influence, the whole game changes. You're no longer chasing, you're creating. You're gaining momentum, and momentum is irresistible. You're the one moving, and they'll sense that movement even in silence. It doesn't mean bragging about what you've accomplished, about success or status. It's about energetic resonance. It's about being the type of person whose presence is good, who listens profoundly, who brings clarity rather than confusion, who contributes peace rather than turmoil. You are the type of person who leaves people better off than you found them. That's the type of value nobody ever forgets. Here's the truth. People remember how you make them feel. When being around you feels peaceful, when your absence feels like a loss of light, that's when pull begins. You don't have to ask for attention. It's freely given because you've become the source of something they can't find elsewhere. So if you need to make an avoidant miss you, stop attempting to receive something from them. Begin to offer something that raises both of you. Offer inspiration, offer warmth, offer growth, not out of need, but out of abundance. Because the instant your world is larger than the relationship, they'll yearn to be part of it. And here's the paradox. When you no longer make them the center of your energy, they begin orbiting around you. When your attention moves from validation to value, from waiting to creating, from scarcity to abundance, you change the entire dynamic. You no longer pursue attention, you attract it. That's the quiet power of value. You become so centered, so vibrant, content, that your energy draws naturally. You're not the one knocking on their door anymore. They're the one wondering what it would be like to stand in your light again. Boundaries. Most people assume boundaries push people away, but the truth is the right boundaries attract the right people. Boundaries aren't walls, they're invitations. They're how you teach others how to feel your energy without cutting you off from it. With firm, peaceful boundaries, you're expressing something profoundly appealing. I understand my worth. I honor my energy. And I ask that you do the same. To an avoidant, that's not threatening, it's comfortable. Because boundaries bring clarity, and that's something the avoidant doesn't often encounter in emotionally charged relationships. Avoidants don't flee from connection itself, they flee from chaos. They flee from emotional intensity that's perceived as unpredictable. When you have no boundaries, you're like a loose wire. You're hot one minute, reactive the next. That kind of emotional unsteadiness is scary for them. But when you do have boundaries, when you know where your line is, you become rock solid. And rock solid builds trust. It says to the avoidant, you don't have to guess who I'll be tomorrow. You don't have to control my feelings. I'm firm. Most people believe boundaries involve yelling no in anger or aloofness. Peace-based boundaries are what they truly involve. They're not about controlling others. They're about respecting self. They communicate, I care about you, and I care about me too. They don't withdraw or punish. They set a standard. And that standard holds power because it provides the other person with something to push up against. There's nothing more attractive than someone who knows who they are and what they believe in. Consider it. When you have someone tell you quietly and assertively, that doesn't work for me, there's power involved, you sense their surety, it's not emotional, it's based on reality, that type of energy demands respect. And for an avoidant, it's the first time they've witnessed a type of connection that does not demand submission. They begin to get it. Wait, this person can maintain their own energy. They don't need me to fill them up. They can stand beside me, not below me. That's where safety starts. Tony Robbins frequently says, you get what you tolerate. Boundaries are the way in which you set the bar higher for the type of energy that you tolerate around you. When you lower your bar in the name of staying close to someone, you're showing them that your love is without bounds. But when you set a boundary, when you say, I won't stand for being treated this way, or I need room when communication becomes reactive, you're not just teaching them something stronger. Your love has shape, your energy has purpose, presence has worth. The instant you begin to hold those standards without theatrics, your energy changes. You're no longer trading your worth, you're living it. And that shift doesn't push people away, it filters them. It shows the avoidant that you're not a threat, you're a force, a calm, contained, self-respecting force. They might test it at first, avoidants often do, but deep down they feel more drawn to the person who can say no with peace than the person who says yes out of fear. Boundaries also create polarity. When you are able to stand in your own power without flooding into theirs, the dynamic is equalized. They're no longer fleeing an emotional flood. They're walking toward emotional structure. Your no is magnetic because it's clean, not brutal. It says, you can come close, but on healthy terms. And that affords them something they never had before, safety and freedom in the same space. So keep in mind, boundaries are not about keeping people away. They're about keeping your energy clean so that connection can flourish. They're the unseen structure that allows love to breathe. They establish a rhythm, space, respect, closeness, integrity, and that rhythm renders you irresistible because it's unconventional. When you establish boundaries, you're no longer fearful of losing others. You're only concerned with losing yourself. And that confidence, that still voice, communicates more clearly than any explanation ever could. Avoidants begin to feel that your presence isn't accompanied by pressure, it's accompanied by power. They begin to trust it, they begin to hunger for it. That's the paradox of boundaries. When you cease letting everything, you cease losing yourself. And that's precisely when people begin to desire more of you, because you're no longer readily available, you're worth earning. Energy rather than effort leads the way. This is where it all comes full circle. Because despite all the strategies, the quiet, the boundaries, the worth, you learn that the real power was never in what you did. It was always in who you became. Energy doesn't lie. You can say all the correct words, send all the correct signals, play all the correct games. But if your energy still yells, please pick me, the avoidant will know it in an instant. What draws them back isn't your pursuit, it's your balance, your calm, your unwavering presence. Leading with energy is realizing that connection is an energetic exchange, not a performance. When you are grounded in your energy, when you're acting from fullness rather than from fear, people feel that. Avoidants particularly can tell if your calm is genuine or scripted. They're highly sensitized to emotional undertows. They're not reacting to your words, they're reacting to your vibration. So when you cease doing to get a reaction and begin being in alignment, the whole dynamic changes. You move from fear, you move from authenticity, you move from seeking a response, you build a resonance. That's the subtle but great distinction between effort and energy. Effort is like saying, I need you to verify me. Energy is like saying, I'm already complete. And the second one, that's magnetic. Tony Robbins is always saying, change your energy, change your life. When you raise your inner state, when your emotional resonance is a place of peace, gratitude, and power, you naturally alter the way people perceive you. You don't have to demonstrate your worth. Your energy does it for you. You don't have to compel intimacy. Your presence invites it effortlessly. Consider those moments in your life when it all seemed to move. You didn't need to hunt. You didn't need to struggle. Opportunities, people, synchronicities, they just appeared. Why? Because your energy was open, trusting, aligned. You were in creation mode, not control mode. That's the space that invites avoidance and all others nearer. Because energy that's aligned feels like peace, and peace is attracting. Avoidants need that kind of energy. They may not say it. What they are really drawn to is someone who feels safe within themselves, someone who isn't attempting to manipulate the situation, someone whose quiet isn't punishment, but presence. When you cease attempting to get something from them and merely commit to being something formidable in your own right, they begin leaning in. They begin sensing your absence not as emptiness, but as gravity. Leading with energy also involves being consistent. Your words, your actions, your tone, all the same as the person you claim to be. No mixed messages, no emotional bursts, no trying to manage with reaction. You become a peaceful frequency in an otherwise noisy world, and when you hold that, people naturally adjust to your vibration. You lead by example, and others tend to follow without having to say a word. And here's the secret: when you lead with energy, you're no longer invested in results. You're not working to get them back. You've moved past the pursuit altogether, because now your mission isn't to draw one individual closer, it's to send your power outward. The avoidant becomes one among many who sense your energy change, not the focus of your world. That's when they begin to pay attention. That's when they begin to wonder, what changed? You understand? Real attraction is never manipulation, it's being embodied. It's living life so that your peace is your loudest declaration, your silence your most powerful tongue. You no longer seek attention without effort. When you enter a room, your energy precedes you. When you establish a boundary, it is honored without apologies. When you retreat, it's noticed, not because you're withholding, but because your presence has grown scarce and is now more powerful than ever. That's what it takes to lead by energy. Cease trying to get others to acknowledge your value. Be your value. Cease trying to show your composure. Be it. Because when your vibration is the norm, not the effort, you cease drawing chaos, you begin drawing alignment. And that's the final silent move. Not chasing, not proving, not fixing, just being so grounded, so radiant, sure of your own value, that even the ones who once pulled away start craving your energy again, not because you're chasing them, but because they can finally feel what peace feels like. That's the quiet revolution of power. That's how you get avoidance to want your attention. By no longer needing it, you don't chase connection anymore, you are it. You lead with energy, not effort, and the world follows.